I'd been here before, many years ago, but the first time of coming back as an adult, really, and feeling such a kind of recognition of it. You know, it's also a space that you're very familiar with from images until you get here, and then you realize the full kind of Kubrick science fiction of the whole thing. I don't know, it feels like a space that can support any kind of fantasy in a way, because it is so untouched by outside. Yeah. So Safeconduct came from the most obvious of sources, which is airport security protocol, really. And that comes from me traveling an awful lot, doing shows and things and lecturing and stuff. And noticing airport security videos, which are predominantly, they're usually animations, they're usually cartoons of some kind. And why that would be, why would they be cartoons? Because there's a kind of location of extreme anxiety, I think, in a way. Usually you're either running a bit late, but also if you're not used to doing it, it can be quite an intrusive process and a bit paranoia-inducing. And so these cartoon animations of what to do, where to put your liquids and your keys and things, are often kind of childlike in the way they represent. It's usually a smiling figure happily doing their thing, which is obviously far from the truth of what's happening, what kind of submission you're having to make to pass through the border in some way, which is obviously for most of us a very relatively easy process, or at least for me it is. You know, for a lot of people it's an impossible process. So I wanted to make one of these videos, really, but I also wanted to obviously make it hysterical in some way, and by making it hysterical, turn it into a kind of caricature or a pastiche of these things, a satire. You know, something that is a kind of accelerated version of something in order to draw attention to the original subject. So it sort of started like that. I've often, when it comes to music, I've often chosen pieces of music which are overused, that they're kind of tired and worn out. And I'm often drawn to that kind of music, particularly for soundtracks. And the bolero is such a particular piece that was incredibly, you know, radical at the time. People thought Ravel was sort of insane. But it was also a dance. A bolero was a dance. I kind of wanted to make a ballet. You know, oftentimes these kind of airport processes, the luggage carousel, all of this thing becomes a kind of Busby Berkeley musical ballet number. You know, it felt like that. So I wanted to make that. And the hanging screens are kind of mimicking the information panels or the way that advertisements are shown in airports and things. So it had to be this kind of dystopian, blackly humorous thing. Old food, I mean, I think I had the title a long time before I had any of the work. I always loved the idea of food in the digital food, horrible. I mean, my laptop is covered in bits of sandwich that I've dropped on it, and I think the queue doesn't work properly because there's coffee in there, you know. The combination of these things, the overly substantive stuff and the digital is really, it's a bad one. Also, I've always been into food represented in film. I don't know why, I was really into it. So I had this title and I knew I wanted a CGI thing that was involved with food. It turned out really, in the end, except for this sandwich video that's in there, that the food was not the main thing, but that what happens to food, what food is, food's relationship to life, nourishing, food rotting, bodies starving, ignorance. All of these videos loop. So in a way, these protagonists are trapped. You know, they're caught in some kind of loop. They can't get out. And the way that they look down the camera at you, the way that they perform their horrible tasks, the way in old food they're just crying all the time, they're never not crying. So there's no reason why they're crying. It doesn't start and it doesn't end. They're just trapped in some constant limbo. So this idea of costumes, of opera, of theatre, the history of people representing their own histories, historical theatre and opera, and the costumes that they wear, the lives that they perform, and then also the archive of costumes as a collection of absent bodies, or of potential, or of loss, you know, particularly costumes from archives, where they were once full of a warm body, are now just hanging there, thousands of them, you know. I wanted that sensation, again, of bodies not being there, a kind of negation of bodies, which is also happening in the videos. So played out the same way, in a different medium completely. It's often a response, you know, the role of music in these things is kind of as a supporting emotional thing, and I think there's something in that piece of music that is, it's beautiful and it's not overly sad or anything, but it has this melancholy to it. It's a piece that's designed as a loop, so you can play it forever. It doesn't have an ending, which appeals obviously for this form, but it's also it's like a sort of contemporary post-minimal piece, but using a lot of so the chord progressions have a very romantic aspect to them, or even an impressionistic kind of thing. I mean, all of the wall texts, which are by Contemporary Art Writing Daily, who are an anonymous group or person, I don't know, I just email them a lot, and we've worked together a few times now. They were in on the whole project from the beginning, and I would just write to them, and then they, without seeing any of the work, they wrote these information panels, which we always wanted to be a kind of a version of the institutional voice somehow, you know, that they would occupy that place, but in an incredibly odd, ambiguous way, you know. I think I always wanted to do a rolling credits film. The one from Transformers Age of Extinction, just because they're the longest credits yet on record. So they go on for 7 minutes or something, because there's tens of thousands of people working on this thing, which obviously was a kind of irony in as much as it's me and an animator working on this stuff, that's it. So this kind of list of names of bodies, again, it's a huge number of people that are not there. Well, I read a news story about a guy somewhere in the States, Florida, let's say Florida, who went to bed one night and a sinkhole opened up under his bedroom and swallowed him. And they never retrieved the body, they just had to fill the thing in with concrete. And I loved this idea as a kind of, there was no way of knowing, and there's no way also of not interpreting that in some way. And I think I was always into this idea of editing and stopping, just killing something, you know, that you edit interruptively. Was thinking of a character trapped in this loop. So this one has a much more explicit narrative loop, as in he's asleep, he has a kind of nightmare, wakes up, goes through a sort of ennui, sort of angsty series of scenes of songs, and then he's swallowed up by the earth. But there are various points of repetition which seem to point to a kind of inescapable fate, part of the fate of being swallowed by the earth in a way. Like there's a point where the bedroom, so he sort of exists in this horrible little IKEA-filled bedroom with these motivational posters up on the wall. And there's a point where the camera tracks down and you see the whole thing is thousands and millions of the same space. Yeah, the repetition was really important, I think. And changing the scale changes everything. Repetition and difference was this, you know. If you're standing, how your body feels in relation to it changes a lot. And because this bedroom particularly is fit to the 16:9 aspect ratio of the projection, the native aspect ratio of this thing, it fills the projection screen kind of perfectly. So in the right feeling, it can be like this is a tiny stage, tiny, like one wall has been removed and you're looking in at this little thing, or it's 1:1 scale. The difference between these things about how it makes you feel, I wanted that feeling. I mean, it's important to say that all of the videos are, the faces are all animated by my face. So it's me performing each of these roles and then mapping my face and my voice onto the figure. So it's more like wearing a mask or something. So performance is it's always a big part of it. I make CGI things because I'm interested in this mix that they have between obvious artificiality and the attempt to be as realistic as possible. And I would equate that with a lot of technical bits of realisticness, like 8K TVs or something. It's so obviously not just real, it's more and less. So there's this strange mixture of an image becoming more and more lifelike, but that the medium itself is disappearing. So a digital file is less tangible than celluloid or a video or DVD or something. I always wanted to make these videos that people were never allowed to relax into being comfortable with them. I think Happy Birthday is, I think of it as a kind of terrible nostalgia, a bit like someone with dementia, Alzheimer's. There's this desperate desire to try to remember something, the significance of a date, but maybe not remembering why it's significant. The 7th of June is, why is this?
2006, and the scene is set 2006, June 2006, April 2006.
That numbers and dates were an extraordinary kind of metaphoric device. That if I just make up a number, how incredible that is to say 7,527,901 or something. This is a number that exists, or to say the 23rd of July 1972. Anyway, you know, sort of this astonishing, obviously it's really obvious and banal, but it felt important to me at the time. But yes, a lot of this kind of memory construction, it's black and white, which is obviously in the past then, you know. And it's all numbers that are in the past, except for a few that are way in the future. Some of the dates are significant to me in that film, others are just made up. The music in it as well is a kind of, yet again, a sort of trying to use pieces that are overly familiar and trying to see what's inside of them still, so that, you know, you were always on my mind. All of those camera things are absurd because there is no camera, right? So you're making up the idea of a camera, and then you're making up the idea of a camera making mistakes, you know? Sort of excessive push and pull of the focus pulling, which is sort of bad camera work, really. I think that the work is often a continuing investigation, and there are certain areas that I am obsessed by: bodies, abjection, representation. They're kind of quite big bedrocks of art making in a way, but then often wanting to filter them through as contemporary an experience as I feel like I'm having. So it's always attached to the problem of trying to represent something enough and to represent some kind of feeling that I have but I've lost.
6 months to a year. Could be 6 months to a year.
Also, a lot of the work I want really in the end to be kind of empathy machines or something, you know, that they're about trying to connect with people in some way.
I remember